represent the best of what this community represents. So there are a couple things I'd like to do today, and I want to kind of set up the context for our conversation today. First, I'll walk you through my journey as leader and CEO. The other thing I want to do is take you through the Jamba story. And for those of you that know me, I had some other news last week outside of these guys' fantastic news with Sodexo and that launch for them. I announced my intentions to retire at the end of this year, early next year, so I'll move to the next chapter, and I wanted to share just a couple funny stories. One was my mom's reaction, and I'm a St. Louis native, and I'll spend more time talking about that later. My dad is a sky cap at the St. Louis airport, just turned 83, so her comment is, well, at least you're going to beat your dad to retirement. And I'm headed back for my mom's birthday this week, so I'm sure I'll hear a little bit about this from Dad. And then the other was coming in yesterday to the conference, Bud Sorensen said, James, tell me how old you are again, when I told him I was retiring. And then he took me through his work in retirement. So if I'm as busy as Bud in retirement, I'll be actually pretty busy. So let me jump in and walk you through the Jamba story. And, this is a story 25 years in the making. And I'll take you back to really the beginning. And the beginning for Jamba starts in San Luis Obispo with an entrepreneur, Kirk Perrin, that has the same kind of passion as the Back to the Roots guys. He was a cyclist, and really he founded Juice Club. So Jamba started as the original Juice Club in 1990, and he really built a business only to replenish himself. He had a number of, one investor from Benchmark Capital that followed him around for, after the initial launch of his original Juice Club, followed him around for 6 months, trying to get him to expand and build the business. A part of really the incredible history and kind of little known fact around this phenomenal brand. John Mackey was an original early board member, as was Howard Schultz. So if you go back to 2000, this would have been one of the hottest brands on the planet. If you fast forward, and this story has a few twists and turns, but I think the lessons that kind of come out of this more purposeful journey that we try to keep ourselves on in this community, I think you'll appreciate that these things never run in a straight line. So the company IPO'd in late 2006, had a market cap as high as 600 million. You fast forward a couple years, CEO exited, CFO exited, board running the company, and we're literally out of cash in September 2008. So if you remember what was happening September 2008, literally on reputation only, one of the board members secures a piece of bridge financing to just hold off really suppliers. I mean, we literally wouldn't be able to make payroll if we wouldn't have been able to secure the bridge loan and debt financing that got put in place. December 2008, the good news and the bad news is I got the job, and we were in the teeth of the recession. One of the things that a number of friends of mine said, James, we knew you wanted to be CEO, but why did you take this one? And that really sets up kind of the beginning of the story for me at Jamba. I looked at the brand, and I felt like the brand was much bigger than the company. And I felt like if I could take the company through a couple quarters, we'd be able to make it. But the big attraction for me with Jamba, and I've made this comment on a panel here maybe 3 or 4 years ago, The event for me that gave me the courage to even consider taking the job was the time that I spent in the organic and natural industry, and got to be able to spend time with folks like Walter Robb, Gary Hirschberg, and look at companies that were smaller than the really big companies I had worked for. But this is a company that mattered. If Jamba didn't exist, it would make a difference. So that was the mission that I was on as I joined Jamba, but deeply rooted in kind of the Jamba DNA was always this mission, kind of purpose-driven agenda. And what we've tried to do, and I'll only spend 1 minute here, but this is really the true north for our company, and we've only adjusted this ever so slightly over the course of the 7 years that I've been at the helm of Jamba, but this really is kind of the grounding and true north for our company. Our mission is our purpose is to inspire and simplify healthy living, and that's been the guiding principle for this fantastic brand. From the 20-year-old founder of Jamba, Kirk Perrin, and I've been working for the last 7 years to really reset us back to our original purpose and beyond as we move forward. Jamba is a higher purpose company. I want to spend a couple minutes and just share a couple of examples, and I think it'll start to make sense what the draw and big attraction for me was to Jamba. And this is really all about this brand and company is about a company that can be a force for good in the community. So a couple years ago, I had the opportunity to go back to my hometown, St. Louis, Missouri. And again, I grew up 10, 15 minutes from all the things that happened last summer in Ferguson, to kind of set a bit of that stage. And I was able to host an event at Washington University and brought together a huge ecosystem of partners that I'd worked with over time, including the National Gardening Association. I sit on the board for the Gin Youth Foundation, which works with play and physical activity and nutrition with young people in 80,000 schools. We were able to reach out to the Boys and Girls Club that I participated in as a young person. My sister heads up Girls Inc. So this do-good I describe it as a part of the family business. It's just how we're wired. But to be able to go back and have an impact in this local community where I grew up, and really bring Jamba to St. Louis for the first time with our franchise partner was just a really, really special experience, and is one of the things that fuels me as a leader, but fuels our entire organization. It ends up being a filter for the franchisees that come into the Jamba system. It fuels the employees that come to work for Jamba. And I'll share just one other story along the same path. And I want to spend time on the challenges of the business model shift that we've made. So we've moved from a company-owned business model to a franchise business model, and most folks would assume that you lose control, especially as you're trying to play towards a much higher purpose and be more aligned as an organization. But we found the absolute opposite to be true. And I wanted to share a story with one of our most special franchisees, a gentleman by the name of Steve Foltz. He's a franchisee that started with our organization in 1998 with one location. He's grown a business over this period of time to have 19 locations, but he and his wife literally on credit cards with a partner launched the first Jamba in 1998. If you fast forward, Steve and his partners have raised $1.2 million that they've given back to the local Portland community. They've scholarshiped their employees to the tune of $50,000. Over that time frame, they have $500 to $1,000 scholarships. They actively teach young people about going back for education, and they offer flexible work opportunities so that kids can advance themselves. They have 8 courses that they make available on an annual basis that are 3 hours each. So as I think about the discussion from last night, this is a part of the story that doesn't get recorded. And this is an entrepreneur that views the investment in his team members as really the most important work that he can do. And the classes range from run it like you own it. So he has this really interesting session that he takes 100 pennies and he'll take young people through an exercise and literally work them through the P&L of a store with just 100 pennies and walk them through every penny. But I share that to just as we think about alignment across key stakeholder groups, for us as we've made the transition that we're making, our franchise community and the hundreds of entrepreneurs that we work with becomes a really important part of our work. So kind of stepping back and kind of looking at the stakeholder group, and I covered franchisees. If we were having this discussion 7 years ago, we would have been 70% company owned, and to be honest, our franchise community would likely have been more an afterthought. If you fast forward to today, we are 88% franchised, and we will be 90% plus by the close of the year. So the combination of our employees and franchisees really play an important part as we think about our critical stakeholder groups, and those are really the two groups that drive the customer service that Jamba is known for. So I wanted to spend some time, and this is where I'll spend the time talking about breakthroughs and transitions, and this is really personal. That I thought there might be some perspective that would be helpful. So I'd start with kind of where I start, which is St. Louis, Missouri, humble beginning. So I'm an unlikely executive leader to be standing before you. I mentioned early on that I grew up very close to where all the things happened a year ago in Ferguson, and for me that's an important part of the story because it filters how I view the world. The first member of my family to graduate from college, not to attend, but to graduate from college, which is really an important part of my story, and I share that because for me, I view kind of learning as a really, really critical component of transformation. And I always think about the associates at our company, and I look at what they're good at and what their assets are versus deficits. And most folks look at people and they think about what can't they do. And based on where I come from, I think about what's possible. And I think I'm at least a small example to say we all need to probably open up and maybe welcome a stranger or an unconventional member into your team. And if you make an investment as a leader teacher, I think you can often be very surprised. I wanted to just point out a couple highlights from my personal background that have been transformative from a career perspective. So I spent the first 20 years of my career at Fortune 500 blue chip companies, the Coca-Cola company, and I'm making up for those sins now, Ralston Purina, and the Gillette company. And throughout those experiences, for me, I didn't have language to describe what we're talking about here, but I was always that guy pursuing that work in addition to my day job in those companies. That led me to, and I've got 2 daughters, that are 23 and 16. So one of the pieces of work that I've done really across my career have been involved with the network of executive women. And really it's all about kind of leveling the playfield so that, as my daughters enter whatever it is they'll do in life, they've just got an equal opportunity to be included in the conversation in the right way with a level playfield. And I've carried that work into every organization I've been a part of. At Safeway stores, I ended up helping found the network of executive women unit in all of California. I had a big platform. I worked for Safeway. I was passionate about the work as I'd moved from Gillette, but it gave me the opportunity to do good. And the critical takeaway would be for all of us as leaders is to always leverage what platform that you have. I listed the Organic Center, and I mentioned this early on, and this was a really important personal transformation for me that has benefited me mightily at Safeway. And it was, me sitting on the Organic Center board and meeting Walter Robb, who I consider to be just a fantastic friend. The first call that I received when I was appointed as CEO of Jamba was Walter Robb at 8 p.m. on a Friday night. And for those of you that know Walter, that wouldn't be a surprise, but that was the first call I received. And the thing that is special about the relationship that I've had with Walter over time is we were fierce competitors when we sat on this board. But we had some things that were very common views of the world and life, and we worked from that perspective to forge a friendship, which I really value. And I'll share another story. A few years ago when I was at one of the initial conferences, and I call it my 5 or 10 minutes with Walter, and we're in communication 3 or 4 times a year, a couple by email. We meet here, and he's been gracious to come and visit my team and address my team. But he said, James, have you met the founder of Jamba? And the founder of Jamba departed the company on not the best terms. He said, James, it would be really important, I think, if you'd reach out to, and we had talked and we'd emailed and I'd sent gift cards for charities that he'd worked on, but I'd never physically met the founder of our company. And he suggested, well, you should actually take the time to do that. I think it would be great for Kirk. It would be great for your organization to see you do that reach out to the founder of the company and re-cement that relationship. So I took that as great advice. I fly down to visit with the founder of our company, and he was actually surprised. He assumed I had other business to be there. He said, no, I only came down to visit with you. And he was just blown away that I would take the time to really understand the history of our company, and it really, for me, further fortified the agenda and mission that we had put the company on. But it took 2 years for me to do that. So I took over in 2008. My first physical meeting with Kirk Perrin was 11/11/11, and I remember that date because that was the date that we had new competition come into the space. Starbucks entered the juice business with their acquisition of Evolution Fresh. It probably wasn't coincident that was the same day that I spent time with Kirk. So I get off the plane as I get back to Northern California, and Kirk reaches out and said, James, whatever I can do to be helpful, I'm actually all in. But I wanted to just connect some dots on at least my history as a leader to share perspective, and I wanted to do a tip of the hat to Walter Robb, who's been just an absolute dear friend, and I think that's the best of what this community has to offer to us all. So let me step back. This is probably the biggest breakthrough that I've had as a leader at Jamba, and this is a technology that some of you might be familiar with called action learning. And this is a technology that I've personally applied 15 years ago. And shame on me, this is one that for whatever reason, as I thought I was in a turnaround, I never applied this until this year. And action learning works a little bit like this. It's about leaders teaching, and this the history of action learning, and one of my favorite books, and I've probably handed out 2,000 copies of this book, The Leadership Engine. The work is premised off the fifth discipline for the engineers in the room, which is an incredibly hard read, but all about process thinking and discipline. This is work that was applied at General Electric back in their heyday when Jack Welch was at the company. I've contemporized this to the fast pace that we work in. So I literally, earlier this year, have started to take a full day, and we invest half the time in some of the kinds of things that we're doing here, but more driven by building the individual's capabilities and having them be more introspective on the things that they're passionate about, truly looking at and inventorying their assets. And what we're trying to do from a company perspective is we want people to play more in their sweet spot. And you maybe have seen a version of this that would have competencies, passions, and then things that the company needs, so needs of the company. And again, the whole goal is to have all of us play more in our day jobs around the things that we're passionate about. We frame this work in groups of 15 to 18 people, always cross-functional. So I think about the comments from earlier in the day from the professor at MIT. This is intentionally cross-functional. We spend one half day investing in the individual, and we spend the second half of the day working on a real project. And then there's a short fuse, 3 to 4 weeks, where the teams organize themselves into groups of 5 to 8 people, and they come back with solutions. And the breakthroughs we've been able to find by pulling people out of the business, having them to center and think about themselves, and then apply in cross-functional groups themselves to a mission-critical problem of the company, the breakthroughs that we're starting to see inside the company. And we've run a half dozen of these sessions, and my intent is to literally run every person in the organization, including next year. We'll start running the franchise community through that on a market basis. But the breakthroughs here have just been fantastic. I'd love to discuss this with anybody that would want to have the discussion kind of after the session. So changing the world one drink at a time. This is just a little bit of a snapshot of the work that we've done over the course of the last few years. On an annual basis, we serve 250 million servings of fruits and vegetables. We're partners, and I mentioned this earlier, with the National Gardening Association, so we're actively involved in where food comes from and making sure that we are active in our local communities. One of the things that I'm very proud of is the work that we've done around making our employee base healthier. And I'll give just one fun story. We launched the CEO Health Initiative. We've been able to pull our healthcare costs down, and basically we've held them flat for 3 or 4 years. This year will pop up because we're transitioning the business model, but we've actually been able to pull our healthcare costs down. But we have all kinds of wonderful stories that are happening. There's one gentleman who's been with the company 19 years. He's a senior leader in our operations. And he started running as a part of some of this work for the first time. And the story he tells me, he said, James, I played basketball, and I was always fast in basketball and enjoyed running, but never thought about it. So I had my CFO to challenge me to run a half marathon, which I completed. But it got the whole company engaged. And fast forward, this guy now and he started running 3 years ago. He's an ultra marathoner, one of the top 200 in the company, and he'd never run before getting inspired by the work that we had started doing around health and wellness as a company. A couple more slides. So here are some of the results of the work that we've done over the last 7 years. We obviously, we saved the company. We've added a couple hundred units over the course of the last 7 years. We've really reorganized and redone our product portfolio in a significant way to be healthier, less caloric. We've added more organic offerings across the lineup of products. By the early part of next year, we'll be in 11 countries, with the newest countries that we'll launch in between now and the beginning of next year will be Indonesia, Thailand, Taiwan. We donate system-wide, including the company and the franchisees, almost $2 million, or we raise $2 million that go to local charities that stay in our local community. So pound for pound, we're doing as much good as almost anybody on the planet, and we're quite proud of the work that we've done. So let me close with this thought, and hopefully there is time for just a few questions, if there are questions in the audience. For me, it really is all about transformation that leads to breakthrough, and oftentimes that requires sacrifice from the leader and the organization to find that breakthrough. But I think if we put in the time and do the work, I think we are often surprised on the other end on what we become. So with that, I'm humbled to be in front of the audience and would love to take a few questions. Thank you. Doug, do we have time for a few questions, if there are any? If not, I'm around the balance.
Hey.
Hey, Rob.
Hi, how's it going? So what's your plan? What's your plan? So curious.
I'm going to do only work that I'm passionate about, so I'll continue to participate in the charitable stuff that I've been involved in. I just went on the NASDAQ has just launched an entrepreneurial center in San Francisco, so I want to work with entrepreneurs like you guys and the Back to the Roots guys. That's where I want to spend my time, and I'm committed to making sure the next generation of entrepreneurs looks a little bit different than this current generation, so that's a passion for me personally. And I'll spend much more time back in St. Louis trying to do a little bit of good. But my biggest news, and I've shared this with some of you, my wife and I are going to enter the foster care system. We hope to actually adopt a couple young people, so we hope to expand our family by sometime middle or late next year. But and I plan to be a much more engaged parent this time through, so I'm excited about that.